Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, December 4th, 2019 Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, and the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency meeting. We will begin our meeting with a flag salute. Please join me in saluting the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk be kind enough to call the roll, please?
Baker. Broadway.
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Holmes.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Mackey.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Now we're moved to item C. We're going into closed session in conference room A. Did you want to stay tuned? We'll be back. Alrighty. Let the record show, if you don't know already, that the mayor of Roseville finally joined us.
Sorry, I was late.
Yeah. And we returned from closed session. We had regarding existing litigation of the Subdivision Act of some government code section, and there was Sierra Club versus Caltrans PCTPA et al. In Superior Court case number 34-2018. There was no reportable action. So now we'll move to item D. Approval of the minutes of October 23rd, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any items that need to be removed for discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is passed 7-0-0. Where have you heard that before?
I heard an abstention.
Oh, one abstention. Oh, okay. Well, I thought I was trying to struggle for the word, and you said abstention, and I said, so, okay, we got it. Thank you, everybody. Agenda review. Is there anything here that needs to be reviewed? No?
Mr. Chair, you have some alternative wording for item T, but
Item T.
it's will be provided you, but otherwise,
Oh.
no changes.
Yeah, where did I put it? Oh, it's right here. Okay. We're good? All right. Thank you. Now it's the time for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward to speak to the agency board on any item that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Bring it back to item G, consent calendar, Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen may request an item to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Any items? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item G, the consent calendar for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. We'll move to item H for the consent calendar for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. Any items that need to be pulled for discussion? Seeing none, I'll
Second.
moved and seconded to approve item H, the consent calendar for Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. We'll move to item I, adoption of final environmental impact report for Placer County 2040 Regional Transportation Plan, presented by Aaron Hoyt. There he is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Board of Directors. So this will be the first of two items on the topic of the Regional Transportation Plan that are up here for action today. But before I get into those slides on the environmental impact report, I'd like to introduce Steve McMurtry behind me to my left. He is our consultant that was hired to help prepare the environmental impact report. He works for De Novo Planning Group. So he will be sharing in the presentation with me this morning on this item. So before you is the Regional Transportation Plan's Environmental Impact Report. The RTP itself, and I'll use that as an acronym for the Regional Transportation Plan, is our 20-year vision for how we will respond to existing traffic congestion in the county and improve our future mobility as we continue to grow. The regional transportation plan is a bottoms-up approach where we're looking at the general plans, the circulation elements, the various transportation studies that we've done in-house and your agencies have also done. And about 2 years ago today, 2 years ago in December, we kicked off the regional transportation plan with a presentation and overview of looking forward on this plan. And so we're finally coming to that major milestone of completing this work over 2 years of working with your staff at your local agencies, having you sit through different presentations on this topic and also joint presentations with SACOG. So we appreciate your staff's time and your time on this item. But under the California Environmental Quality Act, this project, the Regional Transportation Plan, requires an environmental document and a review of the contents of it and potential impacts on the environment. So we retained a de novo consulting group to help us with that. They prepared the programmatic level environmental impact report, which is a report that looks at the region and specifically this plan's policies, the programs in it, and the projects at a 35,000 foot level. A lot of our projects do not have the design details that we know the footprint of, say, an intersection improvement or a future roadway that might be improved. So we look at it from a high level, which does not allow tiering for certain projects as they go through the construction. So a lot of the projects in this document, your agencies will have to do further environmental documentation on. There are some tiering options through this, though. But with the adoption of this, the environmental impact report is really a compendium of 3 different activities. One was the initial study that was released back in June, the draft environmental impact report that was released in August, and the final environmental impact report that was released on November 21st. And I'll touch on each of those 3 items after this. The initial study was released with a notice of preparation on June 6, 2019. It's really the first step to notify the public that we are working on this document, and it evaluated the various factors that are shown on your screen here. In the initial study, we looked at all these items and how the RTP itself, the various programs, policies, projects within it, would have effects on these environmental factors. We were able to, with some reasonable mitigation measures, clear out those with the green check marks from future evaluation. However, those without the check marks next to them were required to go into a little bit more evaluation through the environmental impact report. On those that, for one example, we'll pick cultural resources. We know that there's a variety of mitigation measures already out there that each of the projects that will have to go through will have to go through in terms of evaluation, historical property researches, working with tribal agencies within the county. So we feel that those existing mitigation measures that have been used and are continued to use, or our state or federal statutes, will be able to clear any of those factors for, say, the cultural resources. We had further looked at those in detail. Those that we were unable to screen out, we were able to look at in further detail through the draft environmental impact report. And those are shown here on the screen. Steve McMurtry will touch a little bit more on the potential impacts of those measures and our next steps. So just a quick look back in terms of our overview. We released the notice of preparation and the initial study on June 6. We hosted a public scoping meeting to talk about that initial study to potentially gain any insight on further areas to evaluate on June 26. We then prepared and wrapped up our draft environmental impact report on August 28th. Had a 45-day public comment period that closed on October 14th, which then brings us to finalizing the environmental impact report and addressing comments, the one comment letter that we did receive from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Services on the environmental impact report, which suggested that we needed to look into greater detail on impacts to wildlife and habitat from vehicle strikes with wildlife. And so we had a conversation with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife on that to find out more information on are there certain migratory patterns of animals, which types of animals are we dealing with here to better address their questions. What came out of that was that just more anecdotally that there is some information of vehicle strikes with, we'll say deer as one example, on I-80 or on some of our local unincorporated roads. And what CDFW had wanted out of this was construction of more overcrossings or undercrossings for fish and wildlife to minimize those impacts. And so what we looked at was trying to find more data from them on what are the potential areas of impacts, how significant are these, how frequent do they happen. And there was a lack of data from their perspective they were able to provide to really justify us incorporating more information into our environmental impact report. We also talked with them about the reality of these projects don't have a specific scope yet or defined boundaries, and so it's probably best to look at their comment in further environmental studies on specific projects. The other thing is, without them having a specific list of projects for wildlife passages, it's hard to really justify incorporating a $50 to $60 million wildlife passage into the plan or even considering constructing those without having more additional detail. So with that comment, we noted our responses, but it did not lead to any changes in the environmental impact report. So with that, I will turn it over to Steve McMurtry to talk just a little bit more about the attachments 1 and 2 in your staff report that highlight the impacts identified within the environmental impact report and our significant and unavoidable findings.
Good morning. My name is Steve McMurtry with De Novo Planning Group. I have just a couple of slides. I wanted to provide you a quick summary of some of the findings from the environmental impact report. In this slide, what you see is really a mirror image of a previous slide that highlights those topics that were found in the initial study to have potentially significant impacts and really needing a higher level of environmental review within the environmental impact report. So those are the ones that have either a green or a red check next to them. What you'll see is after further environmental review, those that have a green check next to them were found to be to have a less than significant impact with implementations of either mitigation measures that we incorporated into the EIR or standard regulations that the state or a regulatory agency has already in place, or in some cases policies that the implementing agencies already have in place. There were 2 topics that have a red mark next to them, and these are topics that we found through additional environmental review that there would remain a significant unavoidable impact. This is not something that's uncommon on EIRs. Pretty much every EIR has some significant unavoidable impacts that are identified. The 2 noted within this EIR is agricultural and forestry resources. And the reasons behind the significant unavoidable conclusion was really from a cumulative perspective. Because there is a vast amount of agricultural and forest resources within the county, just about any roadway widening project, anything that expands into areas that are not previously disturbed would more than likely have some level of impact to agricultural or forestry resources. So from a cumulative perspective, we anticipate that there would be a net reduction, albeit a small reduction on the total. There would be a net reduction from a cumulative perspective, and that's unmitigatable. Also, greenhouse gases. What we found through the analysis is there's a lot of improvements, efficiencies in the mobile system that would reduce on a per capita basis the total emissions from each individual. It was calculated to be a 9% reduction on a per capita basis. However, we found that there would be a net increase in total greenhouse gases generated from the mobile system, and that's really a result of an increasing population. So even though there's a net reduction of 9%, the population outweighs that, and there's a net increase in total greenhouse gases. So anytime that there is a significant unavoidable impact that is found, there's a requirement to adopt a statement of overriding considerations in order to certify the EIR. And what that does is it allows the approving board to consider various social, economic, technological, legal, and other types of considerations or benefits that outweigh the environmental impacts of the impact. So we have findings as part of the packet. Findings of fact are going to include the evidence that supports the conclusions within the initial study and within the EIR. It's going to identify what was determined to be the environmentally superior alternative, and in this case, it is the proposed regional transportation plan. And then we've identified a variety of topics or benefits where we consider the benefits outweigh the significant environmental impacts that were identified. And these are reducing traffic congestion, improving mobility. There's socioeconomic growth that supports a sustainable economy, preservation enhancement, community character and environment. And then there's the requirement to ensure that there's a feasible funding program in the long run for the county. The last component of the analysis, and this is embodied within the final EIR, is a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And what this is a consolidation of all mitigation measures that are identified within the initial study and the RTP EIR into one place. And this is a document that would move forward to essentially ensure that the mitigation measures are implemented on the longer-term basis. Within the program, it includes 4 components. It includes the mitigation measure itself. It identifies the timing of when the mitigation measure should be implemented. It identifies the responsible party for monitoring, and then there's also a box for identifying or noting verification that there was compliance. And with that, I will hand it back to Aaron.
Thank you, Steve. So with that, the approval of or adoption of the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan's Environmental Impact Report, requires 3 actions. And those 3 actions are listed in your staff report that we need to, and the attached resolution. That one, we need to adopt findings regarding the significant impacts and the project alternatives. We need to adopt also the statement of overriding considerations, as well as adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program that are included in your attachments. We did take this information through our technical advisory committee, and each of your staff who participate on that did concur with the adoption of the RTP's environmental impact report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoyt. Any comments, questions from board members? Yeah, please. Director Joyner.
So I'm just curious, SACOG is attempting to reach a 19% greenhouse gas reduction. We've got a net 9% with an actual increase. How are we rectifying that?
So our, actually the 9% mentioned was actually a 9% decrease over per capita from,
Right.
yeah, 9% decrease. So it's not the 19% that SACOG is trying to reach in the overall 6-county region. Their 19% required by California Air Resources Board for the 6-county region. We, as in Placer County, do not have a specific target that we have to meet. And so that 9% is part of the overall plan. So each of the different jurisdictions within the 6-county area are trying to meet the 19%. And it's not, I guess, the 19% does apply to each of the local geographies within the 6-county region.
It
that-
doesn't, but if each and every one of us fails to meet the 19%, then the entire region fails to meet the 19%.
Yeah, there are some areas that will do more than their share and others that may do a little bit less than their share within the 6-county region. Part of that has to really do with location of housing and location of jobs and how people have to drive. While Placer County is a large job hub and does have significant jobs, and a lot of our residents do work in our jobs, there are still employees and residents who drive to Sacramento that may drive to Rancho Cordova for those major job centers. And part of that driving would potentially, hinder the ability to further reduce the greenhouse gases. And so until we really get a handle on having jobs for every resident in our county, or making sure that everyone's not driving as far, those are really the 2 factors that we have to look at to improving our GHG reduction.
All right, fair enough. Thank you, Eric.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Anyone from the public wish to address us on this item? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for action.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt resolution number 19-32, adopting the final environmental impact report, adopting a statement of findings, a statement of overriding considerations and a mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the Placer County 2040 Regional Transportation Plan. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is passed unanimously. Now we'll move to item J, the adoption of the Placer County 2040 Regional Transportation Plan.
All right, thank you very much. So this is the second component of today's presentation on the Regional Transportation Plan itself. Aside from us doing an update to the Regional Transportation Plan every 5 years, it does serve several purposes. One, it allows us to dust off our goals, policies, objectives. Maybe there's some additional things that we want to be able to focus on, and that is a great time to do that. Plus, we have an ever-changing landscape, in both politically, planning-wise, that we may need to take account for different goals and policies. It allows us also to respond to changes in land use patterns, changes in priorities for our transportation projects. There's a significant difference in the project list of this plan versus our 2036 plan that was adopted in 2016 because at that point in time we were barely coming out of the recession. And since then there's been a lot more activity happening at the local level. More development has been coming forward. That's changed our local jurisdictions' focus on what their transportation projects are or what their priorities might be. And different projects may have advanced during that time. But the RTP's development at our level is significant really for two reasons. One, it represents our locally prepared and adopted regional transportation plan that is then incorporated into SACOG's Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. And it also serves as a mechanism for providing eligibility to receive federal and state funds. Now, I did mention the incorporation of SACOG's Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, which has a direct correlation to Mr. Joyner's prior question. It is glad to note that SACOG's Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy was approved by their board unanimously on November 18th. It was also signed the same day by Caltrans approving that document. So that is a major milestone and hurdle to have sign off by Caltrans on the same day. And then the Federal Highways Administration, who SACOG also needs approval from on this document, signed off on the approval on November 21st. And those are all significant for really one reason, and that's the SAFE rule, or the One National Rule program that's coming into play, or did come into play on November 26th. And so having that document approved prior to November 26th, one, provides us with an air quality conformity determination that will allow us to move forward with all of our projects that are contained in this plan, and two, it verifies all the projects in the plan, and specifically the 4-year part of the plan, which is immediate projects that have funding on it. So that is a significance of approving SACOG's document. But going back to our document, I wanted to really just take a few seconds to reflect back on where we've been in Placer County, and then be able to talk about where we're going. I heard a story at the state of Roseville's presentation on Aventis Health, which is one of a large employer who's been here for quite some time, and they said when they first moved to Roseville, one of their first neighbors were cows. And so kind of set the stage with farming and agriculture. That's been our history. We've grown in time over then, and we've responded to various transportation needs over time. We've reclaimed a downtown in the city of Lincoln with the construction of the Highway 65 bypass. We've kind of helped solidify our economic future with strong jobs and commercial retail at the Sierra College interchange on I-80. So there's a number of projects that we have done that are not just transportation projects, but help our quality of life, lead to economic improvements. And I can go on and on and on with these slides, but I didn't feel this was the appropriate time to have an award show or ceremony. But acknowledging the roundabout that's going into Colfax and the opportunities that presents to open up development, open up things for the city, Taylor Road and improving their downtown in Loomis. There's a number of things that have happened across the county that are transportation related but have direct impacts to the quality of life that we live. And with that, in the strong quality of life that we've had in Placer County, our populations continue to grow. From 1970, we were somewhere around 70,000 in population. Every 10 years, we saw about a 50% increase in population up until about 2010. And since 2010, we've only seen about a 14% increase in population. So a significant slowdown happened with that recession. And we think about all the projects that have happened, the improvements that have been made, and responding to our growth has really been, from the transportation side, a struggle to find the money, challenges to implement those projects through all the hoops and hurdles. But we've done that. We still have a lot more, I think, projects on our list here in our regional transportation plan that'll take us into the future, and we're still trying to address our growth patterns that we've had. But as we look forward now, kind of switching our focus, there's a lot more to come in Placer County. We're still known as a sought-after place to be. We anticipate by 2040 about 50,000 more new homes, 140,000 more residents, and about 60,000 more employees. So with that comes, how do we address our current issues we still have, and how do we improve mobility for the future? When I say mobility for the future, it's not just a tag word or keyword I'm using, but as we do grow, and certain parts of the county are going to be more ripe for connected transit or connected transit. And we'll provide more opportunities for exploring potential express lanes. Other projects that the greater Sacramento region, as we are connected to them through jobs, both our residents going there and vice versa, we need to look holistically at the entire the region. And one of the later presentations will talk about that and the coordination that we're currently doing with member agencies through the Sacramento region on the Gateway, or on the Sacramento Placer Gateway study. From the regional transportation plan, I wanted just to highlight a few tangible outcomes. What are we getting from this document and approval today? One, public outreach. We ventured into really a new area with our public outreach and focusing on online surveys. We did this with some success on very small projects past, but not of this magnitude. And through this magnitude, we found out that we can actually reach a really large audience. And doing these online surveys through social media and through email and through using your public information officers rather than us asking the public to come sit down and meet with us and look at some boards and slides. So much greater success with that and better use of our resources and time. We also found out that funding is a big issue that the public doesn't really understand, the funding complexities that we have, and it solidifies our need to continue our education or outreach on funding challenges and needs within Placer County, and that we will need a local source of funding to help bridge the gaps from federal and state funding pots. We also found through the outreach and our work that we do really need a multimodal suite of projects for the future. Yes, we still need to improve the 8065 interchange and the additional phases that are still there. We do need some improvements at local interchanges throughout the county, but we also have improvements slated for increased passenger rail service, future bus rapid transit service connecting to different job centers. So all that's in the future, and as the time's right and as the growth happens, those projects will develop. We found that doing multiple outreach efforts and pinging the public information officers, pinging our local chambers of commerce and others was really a great way to get this information out and to help us, one, gauge the understanding of the topics that we're looking at is really funding and transportation projects. We were able to find out that a lot of our projects incorporated in this are high priorities. Addressing congestion was a #1 priority we found through our outreach efforts. And we've been focused on doing that and implementing projects throughout our history. We also did a joint workshop with SACOG at the Sierra College campus, and that was well received. We had probably about 100 or so people come by there who were just Placer County residents or students who participated in that effort. So that went well in order to really just be out there in the public. Tangible outcomes in terms of revenue estimates. The plan identifies $6.9 billion currently in expenditures. Those would come from a small chunk from federal funds, 23% from roughly the state, but the rest are local funds, and built into the local funds, which are our local sales tax, or the Transportation Development Act, gas taxes that are received back to your local agencies, but also the new Senate Bill 1 and the rehab and maintenance monies that are coming to our jurisdictions, which we'll also touch on in a later item today, of what Senate Bill 1 is doing. But it really still leaves a gap in terms of our funding and how we deliver these projects. And so built into our assumptions here in revenue estimates is a South County sales tax district that could happen and would help bridge those gaps in projects and funding to get what we need, because a lot of the programs we have today aren't going to help address our specific needs. What's coming out of this plan also is, as I mentioned earlier, a broad suite of projects. You can see on the screen here from the different funding categories or the different project categories of highway, roadway network improvements, maintenance and rehab, transit operations capital, active transportation. We have a variety of funding that's going here, and this is very consistent to what we've historically have accomplished with our funds. We've had a high quality roadway network. We've also had high maintenance. We were the top county for a few years in terms of roadway maintenance and the quality of our roadway maintenance. So we continue to fund and invest back into that system that we have and fixing it first. So I'm wrapping up here now just with a quick look back at where we've been. We kicked off the project with a presentation December 2017, but in earnest starting in 2018 with a call for projects with our local jurisdictions, coordinating with SACOG on this also, since our projects were on the same timeline. We began working on the different scenarios with SACOG on their sustainable community strategy and ensuring that the information and items that they were working on was adequately transferred over to local jurisdictions for input and comment and working through all those details. And then earlier this year, we began working on the draft plan and doing our outreach to ensure that we are on the right path and help to verify what we've historically have done and the outreach that we've heard and the input in the past. So today, the recommendation for the Regional Transportation Plan is to adopt the resolution 1931, adopting the 2040 Regional Transportation Plan. So with that, I'd be glad to wrap it up and answer any questions you may have.
Alrighty. I have a comment. When SB1 passed, I was at a coffee with a bunch of old white guys, myself included. And someone asked me about, the sales tax, and he said, or the gasoline tax. And he said, what happened to the money? So I said, well, if you start at Interstate 80, when we widened that, that was where the money went. Douglas Boulevard interchange, that's where the money went. Sierra College Boulevard, that's where the money went, which was really an economic development project, because you see what's happened in Rockland on both sides of Interstate 80. Roundabouts in Rockland, Lincoln Bypass, widening of Highway 49, which was not taxpayer dollars, not local taxpayer dollars. Now a roundabout in Colfax, for crying out loud. That's where the money went. And you don't realize it incrementally, these things happen, but when you start lining up how it all works, it's amazing what we've been able to do. Mm-hmm. And so anyhow, I kind of quieted that gentleman down and let him know that we still have a lot more to go to do. And so it's because of the work that we do together collaboratively and the amazing work that our staff does. So anyhow, that was my comments. Are there any other questions, comments? Want to top that?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to mention one thing that this process did allow us to. At the beginning, we had 53 projects that were knocked out from our local jurisdictions, and this RTP, which is a measure of local control for Placer County, allowed us to get those 53 projects back in. So our staff worked very hard with SACOG to get every single one of those projects back to the plan. So,
thank you. Does anybody in the public wish to make any comments regarding this item? Seeing none, I'll be pleased to bring it back to the board for action. We're asked to approve resolution number 1931, adopting the Placer County 2040 Regional Transportation Plan.
Second.
Moved and seconded to move the item. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The item has moved unanimously. So now that brings us item K, the Placer Sacramento Gateway Draft Plan presentations by David Melko. Mr. Melko.
Good morning, members of the board. lean forward here a little bit. Good morning, members of the board. David Melko, and I will be, along with consultants from Fair and Peers, Ron Milam and Greg Behrens, we will do a presentation on the Placer Sacramento Gateway Plan. So today we're going to do a brief PowerPoint presentation and request that you open up afterwards for public comment to hear on the draft Gateway Plan. We will also be looking at potential projects for inclusion in a solutions for congested corridor grant application that will occur later in 2020. So, in October, we were before you and we gave you, I think, a fairly comprehensive overlook with respect to the gateway planning process, which commenced earlier in 2019, and it was developed in accord with the CTC's draft guidelines and Caltrans draft guidelines on corridor planning. We talked about the public outreach process that we have been going through, and the various projects that were under consideration. And at that particular meeting in October, we indicated that we would be back before you today with a draft plan. The draft plan was released on December 2nd. It will be out for a 30-day public review. It's available, and I think it's noted in your staff report at www.more80choices.com. And you have also an executive summary of the plan before you today on your dais. So today's presentation will be a little bit more condensed. We won't necessarily need to go into all of those aspects of the corridor planning process that we went through in October. We will conduct a plan overview. We will review the candidate projects, particularly the projects that will be potentially eligible for the Cycle 2 Solutions for Congested Corridor grant application process. We will also go through what we've learned going through this process. It's a fairly quick process, about 9 to 10 months, and then we'll conclude by talking about what the next steps are with respect to the gateway plan process and the application. So, just to refresh, we have a study corridor here, and this is the Gateway Study Corridor, and it's approximately a 40-mile corridor with a corridor width is about 2 miles, and we're basically looking from downtown Auburn to downtown Sacramento and downtown Lincoln to the junction at Interstate 80. And it's a multimodal corridor planning effort, so all modes are considered: rail, transit, bicycle, pedestrian, automobiles, high occupancy vehicles. All of that is taken into account with respect to the planning effort. The potential projects that we're looking at and that will be discussed a little bit later are all candidate projects that fall within that gray shaded area, which is the study corridor effort. And with that, I will like to introduce Ron Milam from Fair and Peers, and he will walk us through the actual planning effort.
Morning, Mr.
Gateway
Milam.
plan.
Thank you, David.
There you go.
So the plan contents includes all the outline items in blue text up on the slide. I know you have the executive summary in front of you. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a refresher from the presentation last time on some of these items, and then we'll jump into a little bit more of the details. In terms of a plan, this one's a little bit unique in that we did have plenty of information to start with from other plans. That included the SACOG MTP SES and a lot of previous corridor planning projects, whether they've been done by local agencies or by Caltrans. And so we've reflected that in the planning context, and even in our approach to recognizing the goals and policies and the values of the agencies and the communities involved in the study. As we talked about last time, there was a pretty thorough community engagement process that did include more surveys. We're over 3,000 user surveys at this point, using some of the same methods that Aaron described. Been a very successful outreach effort there to learn more about what users expect from the corridor in terms of their current travel experiences and what types of improvements they'd like to see. In terms of the corridor projects themselves, this is a multimodal corridor plan, so we do have a variety of project types from roadway to TSM, that's Transportation System Management projects, things like ramp meters. We have transit, bike, and pedestrian projects, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about those specific projects in a moment.
And then we did perform transportation analysis to understand the effects of the plan. This is relatively high-level analysis. We don't get into all the details of performance, and we want to cover some of those with you. And then there's an implementation plan. Planning is never done. We're always updating and modifying our plans in response to changes over time. So there's some outline in terms of next steps. And one of those big next steps is really this Cycle 2 grant application, where we're going to be submitting specific projects for state funding. In terms of the candidate projects, you can think of this in different layers. Basically, we have projects from each of the different modes being represented. Here's kind of the big map. A little messy here in terms of lots of lines, but it gives you an idea of where the projects are located and what types. And because we did start with other plans like the Regional Transportation Plan, we did spend a fair amount of time trying to get a little more focused and define some of the projects. For example, if you look at the SACOG RTP, they have a number of line items for things like ramp meters. They just don't tell you where they're going to be located. So you'll see lots of little dots on here. We worked with Caltrans to identify all the locations that would be either adding ramp meters or modifying existing ramps to make modifications for ramp meters. With respect to things like transit projects, we are working with various agencies to make sure we understand all the details about not only where the route was going, but what type of transit would it be and what type of operating parameters. What type of frequency, for example, would it be bus rapid transit that may be more frequent, also have different types of treatments going through intersections. So a lot of those details were worked out as part of the plan. What that looks like when you get down to these individual project types, whether they're roadway or TSM in this case, we do have the express lanes included, but as you'll see in the little graphic off to the right here, there's a lot of options still on the table as to what those express lanes might look like. We did include a particular approach as part of our modeling and analysis, but these have not yet been defined, and there's still more work to be done to define them. As I mentioned earlier, we do have lots of ramp meters shown. There's also local roads. A number of the local roadways serve as parallel capacity to the freeway or provide alternative routes, and those have been accounted for as part of the planning process. In Citrus Heights in particular, just to give you an example of one of the potential Cycle 2 grant applications, they have a complete streets corridor project on Auburn Boulevard that is a parallel facility. That is some of the types of projects that we are considering. On the transit side, it's pretty robust in terms of the types of transit from local service, but also including the Capitol Corridor and new BRT lines. We even have a new service from Lincoln in terms of bus service all the way to downtown Sacramento. And all this has been included in the analysis of the plan. On the bicycle and pedestrian scale, even though we're largely talking about large corridors, there's a lot of opportunities here to improve how pedestrians and bicyclists navigate the corridor, especially getting across the corridor. So this includes some grade separated facilities and gap closures as part of that, including in downtown Sacramento, a lot of their Grid 3.0 improvements. Now, in terms of some of the analysis, we did want to point out a few things. The way we approached the analysis was to take this very large list of projects. There's about 150 projects in total, and we include them on top of the existing network. And we use SACOG's regional model to perform the analysis to measure these particular metrics: vehicle hours of delay, person hours of delay, and then vehicle miles of travel. You'll see this particular set of metrics is based on the corridor, that 2-mile buffer. We also looked at what happens when we compare results across the entire region. The SACOG model covers all 6 counties. Some things to understand about these results is this is a very large, what we call a macro level model. Because it is 6 counties, it's mostly focused on understanding how travel behavior changes in response to the network. What it doesn't tell us completely is what happens in terms of some of the delay that people experience sitting at a ramp meter or going through a signal. So we're not able to account for all the benefits of the project list because we're talking about a 6-county model and not one that's been designed around just the corridor and the corridor improvements. But even this macro level model showed that we would be reducing both vehicle and person hours of delay with the project list. There was a small increase in vehicle miles traveled, and that's expected when you add things like express lanes. There's going to be more driving. But we're able, through the modeling, to demonstrate that we change the speed of travel. So if you've been out there on I-80, you've probably been in that stop-and-go traffic. We're not going to be able to alleviate that entirely, but the speed's improved enough that there's not as much stop and go. So there's not as much acceleration, not as much fuel being burned, not as much emissions. So actually greenhouse gas reductions did decrease slightly with the complete project list. Now there's other things that we learned, and I thought this would be one of the things that might be useful to talk about with this group, beyond just the plan. What are some of the insights? What are some of the things you can think about, especially as elected officials, and going forward with a planning process? Well, through the user surveys, we recognize something that Aaron kind of noted, that when you look at what the users are doing and kind of what they expect, sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect between their expectations and what realistically you can do with available funding and those kinds of things. So some of the things we learned is, first of all, a lot of people drive alone in the corridor. And they do drive frequently, and they often drive for purposes such as work. 66% of the users are driving for work. But if you look at this a different way, that means that there's over 30% that are out there making what we call discretionary trips. They're going shopping. They're going to a recreational destination. They have discretion as to when to travel. A lot of them still choose to travel during the peak and contribute to congestion, even though they have discretion not to. As a result, though, a number of people are pretty dissatisfied with their travel times and the experience they have. Pretty dissatisfied when it comes to the travel times and also the travel options. Not enough travel options, but that's a function of the land use context. The land use in both Placer and Sacramento counties is pretty spread out. The most effective means of getting from point A to point B is a high speed of vehicle travel, typically in a car. So that's the nature of the land use context and something that we need to recognize. Now, when we ask the question, what would the users do to improve their travel corridor experience, this is where one of the disconnects occurs. A lot of them want more highway lanes. And that type of improvement can affect travel times, but it can also lead to more long-term driving. So we have to be careful of that. A lot of them want their travel times reduced, as you might expect. There's a lot of ways of doing that. Adding lanes is potentially one solution, but also those express lanes and pricing travel is another. We also had people concerned about reducing the likelihood of being in collision. We also looked at the results across gender. One of the things that we've noted in our recent studies is there are different expectations based on genders. This was one of them, where women were more likely to put a higher value on reducing the likelihood of being in a collision than men did. And that's the kind of insights that you can gain from going a little bit deeper into the analysis. We don't have time to get through all of those, but we've looked at this not just across gender, but also across income. So if you're interested about those aspects of the user's interests and expectations, we can get into those kinds of details. Now, this is a little different version of the slide we showed you last time on capacity utilization. We wanted to bring it up as part of this session as well to just visually represent the importance of two things. One, when you look at how well utilized existing modes are, whether it's transit or the autos out there on I-80, we have what we would refer to as relatively low levels of utilization. And this is basically the utilization of the existing seats in the peak hour, in the peak direction on Business 80 in the westbound direction AM. So a couple things to note here. We could be doing a better job of filling transit seats as well as the auto seats. There's not that many transit seats compared to the auto seats, though. So the ultimate solutions, if you're really trying to reduce travel times, you're trying to improve reliability, is really finding ways to fill all those empty auto seats, over 40,000 seats in the peak hour and the peak direction. And on a daily basis, it amounts to about 1 million empty seats. So we don't really need more lanes necessarily. We need to find more effective ways of filling the seats that are already traveling up and down the corridor during the peak times. Now, how do you do that? This goes back to the survey. We wanted to understand behaviorally why people aren't choosing to share rides today, because that can help you in your future solutions for the corridor. And there's a lot of solutions here, or a lot of reasons that popped up, but a number of these are things that government action can influence. A lot of people thought it was too complicated, or it took too much time to try and find someone to share a ride with. Those are things that government actions can influence. Now there's Also, an overlay here we need to think about, people answer these questions based on the current price of travel. Most people, when they're making a decision to get in their car and go someplace, aren't really thinking about the cost. Not like it, if you compare it to something like getting on an airplane. We get on an airplane, we're priced based on when we want to go, where we're going, and we think about the price. We don't do that with our car trips. If the price of travel was more expensive in car trips, we would think more about that, and these answers would likely change. But I think the big takeaway here is the fact that we have an opportunity to fill seats. We understand some of the reasons why people are filling those seats today. Some of those reasons can be directly affected by the decisions you make as part of this plan and as well as part of future planning decisions. And so as you think about going forward from this point, we really want to highlight the fact that you do have additional steps. The planning process is not done. The main part of this plan will get to some of the steps that Dave is going to describe here in terms of the grant application, but there's more work to be done even after this study concludes.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
So just to kind of wrap up here with the presentation, as I noted in my introductory remarks, the draft plan was released on December 2nd. It's out for a 30-day review. We will actually be tomorrow in front of the SACOG Transportation Committee to do a brief presentation on the Gateway Plan. We also have soon to be scheduled a meeting with Caltrans Management to go through the District 3 management to go through the Gateway Plan. And then there will also be presentations that I understand that will occur by some of the local jurisdictions where they will be presenting to their various boards and councils. So in early 2020, we hopefully February, knock on wood, we'll be back before your board here and ask you to accept the plan. And at that point in time, the plan and the recommended list of candidate projects will be put together with the development of the project development team and the strategy team, and we will then work on submitting a solutions for congested corridor grant application, which is due in early June. That's state funding, and it's a very competitive process, but we feel we have we've put forward a good effort here, and we think that we should be quite successful. With that, corridor planning, as Ron had mentioned, it doesn't end. It's an ongoing process. There is going to be a next set of work through the action plan that we received a Caltrans planning grant on, and there will be performance monitoring associated with the projects, and all of that will lead to then development of a grant application for a cycle 3, which is in 2022, and so it will just keep moving forward through time. With that, plan is available at more80choices.com, and as I noted, it's available for a 30-day review, and comments can be submitted to the attention of me, David Melko, for those out there in the audience, at Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, and with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions or have our consultant.
Thank you, Mr. Melko. Any questions, comments from members?
Just a comment, if I may. A personal point of difficulty in all of this when we begin to talk about excess capacity within each individual vehicle and the seats that are not filled. Personally, I'm perfectly fine with the notion of people reaching out and wanting to fill those seats on a voluntary basis. When I start to hear that government can somehow intervene and cause that to happen, that begins to be problematic for me. The seats in my vehicle are the seats in my vehicle. They are not excess capacity for the entire community, from my perspective. It may be that the society in the future will view it differently, but in the here and now, that we're looking to empty seats, calling them excess capacity, and trying to solve our problem with that in some governmental form troubles me greatly. Just an observation.
You feel better now?
A little bit. It didn't fix anything, but
I think some examples of those might be the state of California encouraging or requiring more of their employees to carpool, as part of their reduction measures. And it might also be.
and that's fine. That's
It
an
might also be
employer.
pricing, but it is a government-led effort, maybe not a government requirement, but maybe a government-led effort.
Yeah.
Right. So I understand. It's a social engineering.
Right.
That's what it really is.
All right. Any other questions? Mr. Baker?
I concur with Board Member Joyner on that. It does seem problematic when government starts to step in certain ways. And looking at our society as a whole, it also opens people up to increased litigation. You're sharing a ride with somebody, there's an accident, we see all these Uber lawsuits and things like that. I mean, it does have a fiscal impact, not only for the owner of the vehicle with increased insurance and things like that. So I think that needs to be looked at as an overwhelming thing, that there is a fiscal impact to the people that are providing the rides. So.
Any other comments? I see none. Does anyone in the audience wish to address us on this? Yeah, please come forward. No? Okay. Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
That does.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we'll move to item L, the Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure environmental approval. Yippee. And who, Mr. Hoyt.
Thank you very much again. This will be a happy presentation here. You're really taking something from our past regional transportation plan, the document that's at the 35,000 foot level, right? We're actually now down on the ground trying to build some sidewalks along Highway 49. So this is one of those happy feel-good moments that we've arrived at a certain significant milestone for this project before you. So this is just an update today. For a little bit of background on this project, it is a 4-mile stretch of a state highway from I-80 on the south portion of the screen here to Dry Creek Road in the northern portion of the screen. This 4 miles has a quarter of it has sidewalks. A quarter of this corridor has sidewalks, where there's 2 schools that are directly adjacent to Highway 49. There's actually 6 schools that are within a half mile of this corridor. It's become a retail and a government center within Placer County and the Foothills location. So it's not only is it where jobs are today and there's healthcare here, but it's also a place where people living along Highway 49 in the city of Auburn or North Auburn or even Nevada County come to. And so we want to provide a little update on what we're doing to try to fix this and actually connect the pieces of past projects. So I heard from Chair Holmes, at one point in time, they used to ride his horse down Highway 49, and unfortunately the corridor is no longer that corridor. Change is one of those inevitable things.
The sheriff's department did not appreciate that.
They were my buddies. They were down at the Casa Adobe.
So with that, change is inevitable, and much like the presentation I gave earlier, and we're continually trying to catch up to things that have happened. So we have a corridor, again, with 27% of sidewalks within 4 miles. And we have some very important students who go to school along this corridor. You may also be familiar with and trying to distinguish between, this presentation here and the actual work that's going on, the construction work that's going on Highway 49 right now. And so there are 2 separate projects, and these projects date back to at least 2011, maybe earlier. And here also in the audience I have Sam Vandell, who is the project manager for actually both the work that's going on to date and the work on this project. So I'd just like to introduce him. If you could at least wave your hand. There we go. So we know who you are, Sam. So I'd just like to thank him for all the assistance he's provided on this project and shepherding us through this process. So in case there's any questions about the rehab project that you may have, he's the guy with all the answers. But on that project, there's continuous bike lanes that are going to go throughout the corridor. So right now there's some shoulders, and there's actually some pieces that have Class 2 bike lanes. So that's a 4 to 5 foot dedicated space for bike lanes. That's going to go from I-80 all the way up to Dry Creek. They're also constructing a new significant piece of sidewalk, and I'll show that on a slide coming up. And they're also improving all the corridors' existing sidewalk and curb ramps to be ADA compliant. And they're also installing 2 new traffic signals at the intersections of Shale Ridge Road and Loxley Lane. So one of the significant places where their sidewalk is going to be underneath the Union Pacific Railroad track trestle here, right near Airport Road and Kemper Road. So this will be on the east side, or in the northbound direction of Highway 49, where they'll be improving sidewalks. Unfortunately, they were unable to negotiate with Union Pacific to do sidewalks on both sides underneath the railroad trestle here. One side is better than 2, so we'll take what we can get on this project here. Another significant piece of sidewalk that will be constructed is in your southbound direction. So if you're heading south from Marguerite Mine Road or Nevada Street, heading southbound, there will be sidewalks that will be constructed on your right-hand side there. There's some significant earthwork and retaining walls that will go into place there, but sidewalks will go all the way from Nevada Street, Marguerite Mine Road, down to Palm Avenue. Just to refresh some memories here of what is Highway 49. Yes, there are a lot of cars, there are a lot of trucks. There are school children and adults who are walking alongside of the road, and today if they were walking, they're walking in the mud. They're walking in the puddles along the side of the road. There's transit that's provided by Placer County Transit, and I believe also Auburn Transit uses Highway 49. What I did want to point out as we've worked through these details here, that we found through our efforts in preparing a grant application to the Active Transportation Program. That's a statewide active transportation program, in which we received $14.4 million to construct this project. Through that effort, that we found out that in the last 10 years, there have been 43 bicycle and or pedestrian collisions with vehicles throughout this corridor. So some of them will be able to be addressed through sidewalks, and others will hopefully be able to improve upon those collisions working with the schools. So the Health and Human Services Department of Placer County right now are working on a Safe Routes to School plan with each of the 6 schools in this corridor to hopefully educate and train future individuals walking in this corridor the appropriate and proper ways to utilize the corridor. So when we started out on this project back in April of 2018, we assembled a project development team. That project development team is staff from the City of Auburn, Placer County, and Caltrans on this. And we've met monthly to discuss the project, to identify engineering issues, potential improvements throughout the corridor, and to shepherd through the process here. But some of the goals and objectives we looked at early on was to construct continuous sidewalks on at least one side of the highway, recognizing that we do have the Union Pacific Crossing, we do have the Weiss Canal, we do have Rock Creek at the northern end. There's a lot of challenges as well as some opportunities in the corridor, but we wanted to at least make sure we had continuous sidewalks on at least one side. We also wanted to efficiently use Caltrans' existing right-of-way. We did not want to set out on a project where we were having to acquire a fair amount or significant right-of-way from adjacent property owners. We also wanted to minimize the impacts to them and minimize environmental impacts, specifically along the roadside where there's ditches or there could be habitat, and the Rock Creek area, which could significantly increase the costs of this project. So to date, we kicked off the project back in April 2018. We submitted the Active Transportation Program grant that we were successful in receiving some right-of-way and construction monies to fully fund the project and deliver it. We conducted a series of outreach meetings back in January of 2019 through to March, and at some points in time I still continue to receive requests from local Rotaries or Lions Clubs to give presentations on the Highway 49 project and what's going on there. We submitted our draft environmental document to Caltrans for review back in April 2018, and have been working on the project report, which is the report that identifies the background, the purpose, the need for this project in the Highway 49 corridor, and it also includes a set of 35% design plans in it. I'm going to spare you looking at all those design plans, but the next series of slides will be images of what the corridor may look like when completed. And today, we have our project report and the environmental document sitting on Caltrans District 3 Director's, Mr. Amarjeet Benapal's desk. For the project report to be signed, the environmental document has already been signed, so that's a significant hurdle getting past that, and we anticipate signature in the near future on that document, which will then allow us to move into our final design phase. So we'll go from 35% roughly design all the way up to 100% design within the coming year. And if any questions on the subsequent slides come up, or any of the design issues, we also have Luke Fusen in the audience here. He is from Wood Rogers. He is our consultant who is assisting us with the design and getting through this process. I actually got ahead of myself with this slide, and I covered those items. So we'll move on to what's included with this design of Highway 49. So to orientate ourselves on the next series of slides, we have the corridor running north-south here. Where you see the green lines is where this project will be constructing sidewalks. Where you see gray lines is where there's already existing sidewalk, or Caltrans will be constructing sidewalk. So you'll notice there are some gaps within the corridor still, and part of our efforts will be to make sure there's appropriate signage and wayfinding to direct pedestrians across the corridor where they need to. Some of the barriers there that we had with being able to construct sidewalks are on the east side, in the northbound direction between Palm Avenue and Luther Road there. You'll see on the northbound direction there is not any sidewalks being shown there. There's a significant drop-off, and there's really no land uses over there that people might be encouraged to walk to. So we're hoping to direct individuals to the southbound side or the west side of the road to walk. But this location specifically, we're going to start at the north end of the corridor and work south. This is at the Elder Senior Citizens Mobile Home Park, right up near Dry Creek. So in this section, you can see the existing condition and the future rendering that shows sidewalk, and there will be a retaining wall built to hold that sidewalk up. And you also see some green space in between the roadway and the sidewalk. That space there is reserved for future potential widening of Highway 49, and we do not quite yet have anything defined on what that landscaping may look like, if there is landscaping to be involved. So that's something that we will figure out during the next phase of this project and bring back to you. And by the way, the Elder Senior Citizens Mobile Home Park did provide a letter of support and for the grant, and we're very excited about this project. This is Rock Creek here, and in order to get across Rock Creek, the project envisions dropping in a pre-constructed pedestrian bridge over the creek. This did a few things. One, it minimized the cost of widening Caltrans' existing bridge deck over Rock Creek, and it also helps us minimize any potential environmental impacts in that area with the Rock Creek, with habitat, with the stream bed itself. So this is a rendering. We still have yet to make decisions on the design or what this bridge may look like. That will be coming up, and hopefully we'll also be doing some outreach to gain insight on that aspect and bringing that back before this board. This is a segment here. This is still in the southbound direction between Bell Road and Education Street, right near Rock Creek Elementary. And again, in this location, we see a separated sidewalk from the roadway. Again, it's still to be determined how we're going to use that space, but it is reserved for future widening of Highway 49. Now we've transitioned furthest south into the city of Auburn here, and this is looking in the northbound direction. If you're familiar with where Fulweiler and Elm Avenue is and the grocery outlet, this is right in front of that property. Here we'll see on the left-hand side the existing setting, and on the right-hand side there will be the new sidewalk, the new bike lane being constructed by Caltrans, and in the middle of that will be a cement ditch, much like that is out there right now, to collect water. And then it'll transition to sidewalks and a short retaining wall that is already out there, or a separating wall between the property and the roadway. Now, the reason why in this location we're looking at more of a cement ditch or culvert is, one, again, to provide a minimal throwaway when the widening does occur to a 6-lane facility in this section of Highway 49. We did hear comments and tried to work with Caltrans and the City of Auburn about incorporating landscaping in this section. This specific section here, though, has no additional right-of-way to construct or to build in landscaping within within Caltrans's right-of-way. So it would have been a situation where, if we were to provide it, we'd be then acquiring right-of-way from the adjacent parcel from the grocery outlet to construct that. So another opportunity, the idea to address that opportunity came up with trying to work in the future with the property owner to enhance the frontage of their property. So that would still be something to be determined, and working through the city, that would have to happen. So with that, it's a high-level summary of kind of what we envision for the corridor, where the sidewalks are going to be, increasing sidewalk coverage from existing 27% today all the way up to 75% coverage in the future, with both the existing work that Caltrans is doing today on the rehab project and this project. Maybe I'll pause for a second just to see if there's any questions about the sidewalks or the renderings.
Any comments at this time? See none?
Okay.
Oh, wait. Mrs. Mackey.
Yes, we were very interested in getting some sort of shrubbery or something along that area in front of Grocery Outlet, and you said you're still going to negotiate with Grocery Outlet to get some sort of landscaping?
That would have to be the next phase. So what we identified through working through this is that there's no additional right-of-way within the Caltrans existing right-of-way to construct any landscaping. So we wouldn't be able to do that with this project unless we were to acquire. So the better option that came up through discussion is to work with the property owner through the city to potentially do some improvements to their frontage of their property.
I guess I'm not understanding because you have that culvert there.
So the culvert right now is reserved for, there is space to widen out this section of Highway 49 to a 6-lane facility. So should that occur, there will be space for this, and that culvert would go away. There would be underground drainage then to accommodate that water runoff. And so if we were to put landscaping in now, we'd have to rip all that out in the future.
But you're going to have to rip out all the landscaping up 49 that you showed the landscaping on in preparation of widening. You're going to have to take all that out.
Yeah, and so this, we don't know exactly what we're going to do in this setting yet, whether it's going to be landscaping, whether it's just going to be some bark, whether it's going to be dirt, or whether something more robust that might be what you'd see in front of the shopping center around Atwood.
Maybe I can add some context to this discussion. You're actually going to have an item coming up that we're going to ask for 1.2 million more for this project for right-of-way already. In the next item, we got the $14.4 million from the state, and we're trying to maximize that as much as possible. What we're doing in this area is actually we'll put in the piping, similar to what Lincoln did actually with Lincoln Boulevard. They put in all the piping so that landscaping could be done in the future, but we just don't have the money to build it now and maintain it. But actually in Lincoln, they came back later and put in the landscaping and built it. And so we're making it so that landscaping can be done in the future to accommodate that, so we don't have to rip up everything in the future, but we're just short on funding to really build the landscaping now or maintain it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because that brought me to my other question.
Good.
So how much right-of-way property did we purchase for this project?
Right-of-way that we will purchase, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm going to look to our engineer.
Are you looking for total slivers of parcels or total dollar amount being spent?
Both.
Okay. Luke Fuson, you need to come up and answer some questions.
So the number of parcels from permanent right-of-way acquisitions are anticipated to be at 8 privately owned parcels, and they are sliver takes, no full takes, just to allow enough space to build the sidewalk where it's very constrained. There will be approximately 59 temporary construction easements for areas along the corridor for things such as driveway conforms and back of sidewalk conforms on private parcels. The total right-of-way cost at this time is anticipated, I think, 1.6 million.
How much?
1.6.
And Luke, does the number jump out in terms of the total amount of those slivers added up of how much we'll have to acquire?
I'm not sure that I have the areas
Okay.
offhand right now, but they are fairly limited areas, just enough to, say, build a retaining wall footing or a retaining wall up against properties. We are utilizing retaining walls where needed, similar to as what the Caltrans rehab project does to fit these sidewalks in where possible. There is, like I said, about 8 areas where we will need to acquire some right away.
We can look into that total number and provide that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The one other thing, and just to maybe tag on to the landscaping, if there was the ability to do that in the future and how that might happen, Caltrans will require a local agency to enter into a maintenance agreement for that. So if it's within the city of Auburn's property, the city of Auburn would have to sign an agreement with Caltrans of how they're going to maintain it, maintain that landscaping. We did explore the option of, someone had brought it up from the public, well, can a local service group maintain the landscaping? And the answer was no. The Caltrans would not entertain a maintenance agreement with a local service agency such as a Rotary or a chamber even. Now, that's something for the future where the city could decide to work through that effort and find a local service agency to do the work.
We'd be happy to maintain it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nope. Okay. So I believe that was I did have one last slide here. So one last slide. So in terms of where we go next, once we receive the final signatures on the project report, we will begin, as I mentioned earlier, our final design work. That will lead us through the rest of 2020 and into 2021. We'll begin working on the right-of-way negotiations and begin construction probably in the spring season for 2022. So while this looks like a simple sidewalk project, there are a lot of hoops and hurdles and design work to get through before we can get to construction. So I anticipate that we will be coming back at other points, milestones within this project to provide updates to you. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any additional questions.
Any comments, questions from board members? I just want to say, I drive that section every day and in the evenings as well, and I really appreciate the work that's being done. It's really coming along really nice, and I haven't had any complaints, which is good. Caltrans always sends us a weekly update about where we're at, and that's always helpful, so I can explain if there's any questions or details, so I appreciate that. Anyone in the audience wish to address? See none. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now move to item M, Regional Surface Transportation Block Grant Program Guidelines for fiscal years 2023-2025. Oh, Ms. Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So today for your consideration are guidelines and allocations for the Regional Surface Transportation Block Group Program. This program was previously called the Regional Surface Transportation Program, so RST BGP and RSTP tend to be used interchangeably, so I apologize if I use the wrong one. It's a mouthful. This program is a federal fund that's used to fix roads. It's surface transportation improvement. It's a great program. All your public works departments use it well, and it's one of the better programs that we allocate here at PCTPA. So you'll notice that at the top of the allocation spreadsheet, there is $14.5 million. We get those estimates from the lovely folks at Caltrans Division of Transportation Programming. And so we use those estimates to allocate in multiple fiscal year sections. Today, you're considering 2023 to 2025. So the allocation includes the estimates that will be programmed during those years, as well as a carryover from the section that we just finished from fiscal year 17 to 19. Due to our conservative fiscal planning here at PCTPA, there was a $4 million carryover from the section that we just finished, and so that will be going to the next programming cycle in 23-25. You'll notice the board previously adopted guidelines for this program in 1999. The guidelines that we use are that each jurisdiction gets a RST PGP based on its average share of population and roadway miles. This year, we're proposing new guidelines, which are before you for consideration. These guidelines recommend a discretionary fund of about $2.1 million set aside for the Interstate 80 Auxiliary Lanes project. The board received an update on that project in August of this year. By setting aside RSTBGP funds for this project, that allows us to have matching funds to apply for those competitive gas tax funds, which we've discussed multiple times here at today's meeting. You have to have a local match in order to secure those projects. So all of the members of your agencies and who are members of our technical advisory committee have really come together to set aside this amount to go for that project due to its regional benefits. So $2.1 million will come from this set aside of RSTBGP, and the remaining about $900,000 will come from a one-time fund of Highway Improvement Program, also called HIP funds, which PCTPA is doing a swap with the city of Roseville. Other than that set aside, the remaining amount of RSTBGP will be allocated according to the formula which we've used for many years. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, barring questions on acronyms.
Any questions about the RSTGP? Pretty good, huh?
Good job. Did it again.
Comments? Anybody in the audience? Hearing none, we're asked to adopt a Regional Service Transportation Block Grant Program, RSTBGP, guidelines as shown in Attachment 1 for fiscal years 2023 to 2025 and allocate the RSTBGP funds according to adopted guidelines.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to move the item. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The item carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Hanley. We'll now move to item O. Is that we're in?
And we will bar any acronyms.
This one's a little easier to say. So these are our congestion mitigation and air quality funds. We call them CMAQ. And these are also federal funds, which we program similarly in multiple year cycles. And we receive these funds because the Sacramento Valley is a non-attainment air quality area. So you'll notice at the top of the spreadsheet that the numbers from the previous cycle was about 13 million. Now we're getting about 11.5 million. So it's one of those things, as our air quality improves, we're going to get less and less funding. So this funding source is decreasing a little bit over time just from federal allocation. Similar to the last time that we programmed these funds, we'll be doing a discretionary fund of 25%. PCTPA manages that 25%, and of that 25%, $1 million is going to go towards South Placer Transit projects. $1.2 million will be going to the Highway 49 Sidewalk Gap Closure Project, which Aaron Hoyt just presented on to supplement right-of-way funds. And the remaining of that 25% discretionary fund will be used for regional air quality projects, including Freeway Service Patrol, Congestion Management Program, and Spare the Air Day, which we also do in partnership with SACOG. The rest of the CMAQ funds are allocated according to each jurisdiction's share of population. And I'm happy to take any questions on congestion mitigation and air quality. Unlike RSTBGP, these funds are on a competitive basis, so you'll notice that the action before you is to approve these guidelines and then direct staff to do a call for projects. We'll do a call for projects. Your staffs will submit applications for CMAQ funds in the coming months, and then we'll come back to you with an allocation of these funds to specific projects based on these targets.
Okay, any questions, comments for Ms. Hanley? Seeing none, oh, no, you were moving. Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we're asked to adopt a revised CMAQ air quality guidelines as shown in Attachment 1 for fiscal years 23 to 25, and direct staff to issue a call for project based on adopted CMAQ guidelines. I'll entertain a motion. Moved and seconded to approve the item. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the item is moved unanimously. Thank you so much. Now we'll move to item O and go back to Mr. Melko about the Placer County Freeway Service Patrol FSP change order number 7.
Okay. Today, we're requesting the board that you authorize the executive director to issue change order number 7 to the Freeway Service Patrol Contractor Services Agreement. The change order number 7 is shown in attachment 1. So just as a refresher, so we have a privately operated tow truck service that patrols 15 miles of freeway along Interstate 80 and State Route 65. And it patrols the congested segments along those freeways and operates weekdays, except for holidays, basically from 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. and from 2:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. The 2:30 through 6:30 was something that came about as a result of change order number 6 that this board approved back in June that went into effect in July. Change order 6 also reinstated the Atom truck, that's also the service truck, that went from 3 days a week to 5 days a week. And so the current contractor service agreement, this board approved back in 2014, had a base of 3-year terms and 3 option years. We are now approaching 2020. Change order number 7 will be exercising the 3rd option year, the final option year for the existing agreement. So change order number 7 also proposes a 5% rate increase for the operator. That will basically increase the annual amount from $346,000 and some change to over almost quite close to $413,000. So when you do the math, the math comes out to like 19% difference. So how do you go from 5% to 19%? Well, you have to remember that change order number 6 went into effect for the second half of the year. There are fewer operating days, a lot more holidays. And so if you had done it for the full year in a year-to-year comparison, the difference between the 2 years is between 5 to 6%. So we believe, and the TAC concurred, that the 5% rate increase is reasonable. It's within budgetary resources. Those of you who follow the trucking industry know that it's a quite competitive market right now in terms of driver recruitment and retention. There's also increased insurance costs, and then particularly with tow truck drivers, a lot of tow truck drivers are leaving the industry and going to seek better wages and jobs that are less stressful than dealing with what tow truck drivers deal with. And also those that stay in the industry gravitate to AAA contracts because those are quite lucrative contracts. So in all, and when I did a survey with other freeway service patrol operators, the 5% rate increase was considered quite reasonable. And so with that, the TAC concurred, and so we request that you approve change order number 7. And just to let you know that probably probably May, June next year, we will be issuing an RFP for a new freeway service patrol contract. And so we'll go through that process again and then be back before the board next fall with an approval of a new contract. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions, comments for Mr. Melko?
Just a passing thought, as you approach putting out an RFP for new contractors, have you explored the possibility of bringing it in-house? Cost differential in that? It's
I don't think we've ever
prohibited.
really entertained that before. I mean, it's something I guess we can talk, we have time to consider that. I guess I think we'd always assumed that there's resources out there on the private sector side, to do the day-to-day operation, and we have to work with both Caltrans and the CHP, and so anyway, I'll leave it to the management to respond to the in-house operation.
We'll look at all options available.
It probably doesn't make sense, but I was just curious if you'd ever taken a look at the cost differential, what advantages there are to going out privately.
I think the liability alone would prohibit it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for your passing thought.
Well, you're retired now. I thought we could get you another gig.
Never mind. I won't go there. All right, any other questions or passing thoughts from anybody? All right, we're asked to authorize the executive director to issue change order number 7 to Placer County Freeway Service Patrol Contractor Services Agreement as shown in your attachment 1. All those,
Second.
good, thank you. We have a motion and a second to move the item. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or any abstentions? The item has moved unanimously. Thank you. And now, we will move to item P, selection of chair and vice chair for 2020. That's next year. Any recommendations, any thoughts, any?
Well, in our staff report, it recommends City of Colfax.
Already?
That is the turn that is up, because last year Colfax deferred being the chair.
Right.
And so that would be their turn.
Oh, okay.
And,
Alrighty.
and then the backup would be the city of Lincoln would be next in line to be vice chair.
Alrighty. Any objection?
Do we have to nominate or just move approval?
Just move approval. I think it's,
Okay.
yeah, they can figure it out who they want.
John approval. Second.
It's moved and seconded to move the item as far as the chair and vice chair for 2020. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The item is moved. Thank you. Now we'll move to item Q, board direction to staff. Is there any? Oh, let's see. Somebody's got a light on us. No? Okay, all right. All right, there's no direction to staff. We have information items for your perusal. And now we'll move to item S, adjourn to closed session, conference room A. This is a public employee performance evaluation and closed session pursuant to government code conference with labor negotiator. So we'll move to closed session in conference room B. B, not A? Oh, well, that's, oh, it's conference room A, I'm sorry. I was, yeah. So.
Go ahead, Mr.
Alrighty.
Chair.
We've just returned from closed session, and according to this, there was no reportable action from closed session. We'll move to item T, the Executive Director Employment Agreement Amendment. It is recommended that the board approve amendment number 2, maintaining existing salary and benefits, and add an additional 40 hours of administrative leave for the 2020 calendar year.
Second.
Seeing no more further discussion, there's been a motion and a second to approve the item. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the item is moved. Congratulations. Now, there's no public, so we won't go to public comment. Any board comments? I just want to say that we're really happy with Mr. Lucan's performance, and we have nothing but the highest praise for our staff as well. So congratulations, you all. You're doing a good job, and Sylvie, you're a rock star.
Wait, that was my
So,
So-
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
if I may.
Sure.
First of all, it's been a great year. Thank you all for your hard work. We've certainly made a lot of progress in a number of areas, and I always love seeing projects come together on time and on budget. That's a good thing. I know we've got a lot of challenges moving forward, but I'm hopeful we'll see this board seated in the same manner come January. But I probably won't see all of you between now and then, so I just wanted to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you. It's been a pleasure serving with you.
Very nice. Thank you very much. All righty. Without any further comment, we are adjourned.
Thank you.